Hello dancers! Today I'm going to be talking to you about how to point your feet because believe it or not, there is a right and a wrong way to do this. And unfortunately, I see a lot of dancers do it the wrong way. And I want to make sure that you are the most efficient at getting those pretty dancer feet that you have always dreamed of. If you're joining us as part of the free 4-week Ankles on Point challenge, hello and welcome. This is week number 3 for you guys. So like I mentioned, there is in fact a correct way to point your feet. And unfortunately, I think a lot of times when you're a little bit later into your dance training, you kind of forget about some of this stuff, or maybe nobody has ever really gone through with you how to point your foot. You know you're supposed to point your foot, but maybe not what muscles you're actually supposed to be using. So let me share a little bit of that education with you so that, again, you can be most efficient at this and really improve a lot of your different techniques. So very often I see dancers kind of crunch down and they point their foot instead of pointing from the ankle. So ideally, the muscles that are supposed to control our point are along the back side of our calf. They are your gastroc and your soleus muscles. And together, these two muscles form your Achilles tendon and attach right down into the base of that heel. And then at the top, they're attached up to your knee joint. These are together known as the triceps surae muscles, and they are responsible primarily for plantar flexing or pointing our feet. Now we also have another group of muscles on the inside and the outside of the leg, known as, we call them the stirrup muscles, and these consist of your peroneals and your posterior tib muscles. Now these muscles run down the sides, they loop behind these bones in your ankle and go right down into the foot. So they have a really big role in supporting the arch and making sure that you have good medial and lateral alignment on the ankle. And then they act as a secondary plantar flexor, which again is the direction of pointing. Sometimes what ends up happening is these stirrup muscles take over and they try to do all the work of the plantar flexion motion, when in reality, we want a lot of that power and movement to come from those posterior gastroc soleus muscles. So in learning how to properly activate the posterior muscles, you will in turn be able to improve not only the strength, but the appearance of your point. Now, the other muscles that we have involved here are the foot muscles. These are called the foot intrinsics. They're the tiny muscles inside of the foot. And these muscles are responsible for maintaining that nice, pretty arch shape. But again, if we overuse the muscles in the pointing motion, we end up with kind of that crunch down look, which is not what we are going for. So let's talk about how we can actually improve that point and get the correct muscles to activate. So when you are going into your point, whether it's a tendu or even a releve, what I want you to think about is pointing from the ankle first and then from the toes. So if you watch, I'm going to try to elongate through my ankle joint, the front of my ankle first, and then the toes will complete the movement, versus pointing my foot and crunching down on those toes, and you'll see I lose my arch. I even sometimes lose a little bit of the range of the motion of the plantar flexion. So now it looks like maybe I don't have that nice straight line that I'm capable of. So we want to make sure, again, that we're pointing from the ankle first and then the toes follow. This is going to ensure that you are getting really good posterior calf muscle activation. So now let's talk about a couple easy exercises that you can do to improve this, and I think this will help make even a little bit more sense of how you can get those pretty dancer feet.
I love using the tendu towel slide as a way to get posterior muscle activation. What you'll do is stand with the towel under your foot in parallel. Press the ball of your foot into the towel as you push it away. Point through the ankle first and then complete the tendu through the toes. If you watch the same exercise from the front, be mindful that the ankle and foot stays in the straight line with the rest of the leg. We can do a similar exercise using a small ball. You're going to practice pointing through the ankle first by pressing the ball of your foot into the ball. This should activate more of the posterior muscles versus the lateral stirrup muscles. Again, be mindful that the ankle doesn't roll in or out. No sickling or winging. We should be in a nice straight line. And finally, we can also practice this movement with a TheraBand. Again, push through the ball of your foot to point the ankle first and activate those posterior calf muscles, and then complete the point with the toes, being mindful not to crunch the toes and collapse down on the arch. You really want to think about elongating that ankle and foot as much as you can. Energy goes outward instead of down. As always, make sure that ankle stays in a nice straight line at the same time.
So the last piece of this puzzle that we're going to talk about is how we take this and apply it into our weight-bearing positions, or releve or eleve. So when we are going up into our releve, we want exactly the same thing to happen. We want to think about utilizing those posterior muscles to do the work as I come up versus too much of the medial lateral stirrup muscles. And so in doing that, what I want to do is push through kind of my second and third toe. That's where the weight is going to go. Just like when you did that tendu towel slide, I'm going to push through the second and third toe, raise up into my releve, and then lower back down. So the weight is coming through my metatarsals here, versus when I go up into releve, if I'm crunching those toes and gripping the floor, I'm starting to use too much of my foot intrinsics, stirrup muscles, things like that. So instead, I want those muscles to just help with the support, but the majority of the work has to come from my posterior calf muscles, and actually my toes should be in a much more relaxed position. When we go up into that releve, the other thing is making sure that if you're looking at the front of the leg in parallel, that there's a straight line between this, or down from the center of the shin, between the two bones in the foot, and then through the center of the foot to that like second, third toe. If I am too far into my first toe, I'm collapsing, losing that arch, pressing up through the inside of my foot, I'm going to be getting too much of the external muscles here, which are your peroneals. So a lot of excessive winging will create a lot of activation on the lateral stirrup muscles. If I am in the opposite direction, putting too much weight into my kind of fifth or outside of my foot, fifth metatarsal, I'm getting more of that sickle position. Now I'm getting too much activation on the inside muscles, which is my posterior tibialis muscle. Instead, if I stay nice and even and in a straight line, now I'm going to get a much more even activation of my calf muscles, and hopefully that won't lead to things like potentially tendinitis and whatnot. So hopefully that was helpful. Put it together with both weight-bearing and non-weight-bearing positions and see how it improves your technique.